In this Blender tutorial, I'll show you how to create this procedural brown granite material. And after we create the procedural material, I'll show you how to join it together into this custom node group. So we have this scale value so you can change the size of the entire material. Then we have 5 different colors here. So you can use all these colors to really customize the granite. And you can make many different colors of the granite. Then we also have this detail level. So if you want less detail, you could turn that down. But I want my granite to be very detailed, so I'm going to keep it up at 15. And then we also have the roughness of the granite, so you can make the surface more rough or more shiny. And if you'd like to purchase this procedural material, you can get that on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page with the links in the description. And you can also purchase my Ultimate Blender Procedural Material Pack if you're interested in purchasing all of my procedural materials. You can also purchase any of my materials individually on my Gumroad store. And to learn how to create any of my procedural materials, you can check out my Blender Procedural Material Tutorial playlist. Links are all in the description. So real quick, I'll show you what I have set up in the 3D viewport if you want to set up the blend file the same way that I have. So I went to the add menu and I added an icosphere, and then right behind me, if you open up the add icosphere settings, I turned the subdivisions up to 6 so it is nice and smooth and round, and then I used the object context menu and shaded it smooth. And then I scaled the object down by 0.2, and I'll press Ctrl A and apply the scale, so that's the object's new default size, so it's a better size when modeling to the real life scale in Blender. Now I also wanted to add a cube to see what this object would look like on like the side of a countertop. So I'll go to the add menu and I'll add a cube. I'll scale the cube way down, and then I can also scale it down on the Z-axis, make it a bit smaller, kind of rotate it up like this and move it over to the side. Double tap the R key to use the trackball rotation, and then I'll press Ctrl A and just apply the scale. Then I'll go into edit mode, and with everything selected, I'll press Ctrl B to add a bevel. Then I'll scroll my mouse wheel to make more cuts in the bevel and just make a nice smooth bevel and place that right there. I can go back to object mode and use the object context menu to shade it smooth. Then what I'm going to do over here on the side panel, if you go to the modifiers, is I'm going to click on add modifier, and I'm going to add the weighted normal. So just add the weighted normal, and the weighted normal is going to kind of flatten out the flat spots. So you can see before, kind of on the edges, it's a little bit hard to see, but kind of on the edges, it almost looks a little bit darker and kind of smooth. But if I use the weighted normal, it kind of sharpens up the flat faces, and it will just make the shading look a little bit nicer. It is pretty subtle, but I like that a bit better. Then I added a camera, and I just pointed the camera at the objects. And if you select the camera and go to the object data properties, I turned the focal length up to 80, so the camera's kind of zoomed in a bit. Then I also added 3 different area lights. So this one here is a very large area light, and I turned the power to 5 and just had it on the bottom, kind of pointed up to give it kind of a rim light there on the bottom. Then I added another light right here, and this one I have turned up to about an 80, and this is the main light kind of shining down the sides of the object. And then I have this one over here, and this one's also turned up to about an 80, and it's shining down and giving some nice bright lighting from the top. Now also to get some more realistic lighting and reflections, over here on the world properties, I added in this Machine Shop 02 1K HDRI from polyhaven.com. The link will be in the video description if you'd like to download it, and I downloaded the 1K HDR version on Polyhaven. So once you download the HDRI, you can click on the yellow dot here next to color, you can choose environment texture, and then just click on the open button and open up the HDRI. And I turned the strength to 0.5 so the HDRI wasn't quite as bright. Now also here on the render properties, if you open up the film tab, you can checkmark the transparent button if you want the background to be transparent. And then here on the color management, to make the colors look nicer, I turned the view transform to filmic and the look to very high contrast. So I am in the shading workspace. So over here I have the 3D viewport, and I'm in the rendered view, and then here I have the shader editor. So I'll just select the object, let's click on new to add a new material. I can drag and drop this material onto the other object so they both have the same material. And let's rename this material to brown granite. And then I'm also going to be using the Node Wrangler add-on to preview the different nodes. So to enable the Node Wrangler, you can click on Edit, you can go to the Preferences, and over here on the Add-ons tab, if you go to the Search, you can search for Node, and you can just enable the Node Wrangler add-on, and I'll show you how to use it in the video. So let's first create the first group of textures. So I'm going to go to the Add menu, and I'm going to search for a noise texture. Let's drop it here. And then to use the feature of the Node Wrangler, you can Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview the node on the object. Now you can see the noise texture is kind of stretched on some of the objects. So I'm going to select the noise texture and I'll press Ctrl T. That's using the Node Wrangler feature, and it's going to add the texture coordinate and mapping. Now I want to plug the object into the vector, and that way the texture will be placed on the objects more evenly by using the object coordinates. Now I'm going to box select these nodes here. I'll press Ctrl J, which will add a frame, and I'll select the frame and I'll press F2 to add a label, and I'll just call this mapping just to keep the nodes nicely organized. So now let's change some of the noise texture settings. So on the 3D here, I'll change this to 4D, and then I'm going to turn off the normalize so it looks darker. And then I'll turn the scale to a 4, I'll turn the detail to the max of 15, and the roughness all the way up to 1, so it's super detailed. So this is kind of giving us the effect of the Musgrave texture, which was a texture node in older versions of Blender, but in the new Blender update, they've combined the Musgrave and the noise, so you can still get the effect of the Musgrave using the noise texture and changing those settings. Now I want to change the colors a bit, so I'll go to the add menu, I'll search for a color ramp, we'll put this after the noise texture, and I just want to drag the white tab out so everything's a bit brighter. So I'll put the white tab kind of to about there. So now I want to make the custom colors. So I'll go to the add menu, I'll search for the mix color, and we'll put this here after the color ramp. And the color ramp color is going to go into the factor to determine what parts are going to be color A and what parts are going to be color B. So now we can make the colors, and for color A, I'm going to be using this kind of dark brown. And if you want to use the exact same color I'm using for this dark brown, you can go to the hex value and you can punch in 4336 2A. Then for color B, this is going to be kind of like a light brown, and the hex value for this one is going to be 9A 8470. So I'll box select these nodes, I'll press Ctrl J to join it together into a frame, and if you want to, you can add a label to the frame, and you could just call it like texture 1 or whatever you want to call it. So let's now create another group of textures, and later we'll be mixing the groups of textures together. So for the second one, I'm going to go to the add menu, we're going to add a noise texture, drop this up here, and the same vector can go into the vector, the noise texture, so it's using the object coordinates. And let's Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it, and we can change some of the settings. So I'll turn the scale to 6, I'll turn the detail to 15, and the roughness I'll turn to like a 0.73 so it has more detail. And then this lacunarity value, I'm going to turn this to like a 4.6, and the lacunarity is going to add some little kind of circles here or little dots. You can see the texture looks a bit clumped because of that lacunarity. Then I want to make it more contrasty, so we're going to go to the add menu and we'll add a color ramp and put that after the noise texture. And I just want to drag both tabs together so it's much more contrasty. So I'll just put the white tabs and black tabs like that so it's more contrasty. And then I want to make the custom colors for this texture. So let's also add another mix color. We'll drop this after the color ramp. And the color can go into the factor, so the white and black values are determining what parts are going to be color A and color B. So for color A, this is kind of going to be a slightly reddish brown, and the hex value for this one will be 754B32. And then here in color B, this is going to be like a light brown, and this color, if you go to the hex value, is going to be 988761. So I'll box select these nodes, and I'll join them into a frame, and I'll add a label, and I'll just call this like texture 2, just to keep things nice and organized and easy to understand. So let's now create a third group of textures. So for this one, I'm going to add a Voronoi texture. We'll put this above here. And then I also want to add a noise texture, and we'll stick this here. Now we're going to use this noise texture to distort the Voronoi, but first let's Control Shift and select the Voronoi to preview it. And I want to use the same mapping, so we'll put the vector into the vector of the Voronoi. And then we can change some of the settings. So on the type here, on the Voronoi, I'm going to change this feature output type to distance to edge instead, so it adds these little cracks here. And then let's also change some of the settings. So I'll turn the scale to 20, I'll turn the detail to like a 6.7, and the roughness here, I'm going to turn this to like a 0.47, and then this lacunarity I will turn to a 5.3. So now I want to distort this using this noise texture, so we're going to drop the noise texture in between the mapping and the Voronoi. And then we can change these settings, so I'll turn the scale to 2, let's make it very detailed by turning the detail to 15, and the roughness to like a 0.68. And then I'll leave the other settings how they are. So now you can see we have another really cool detailed texture. And then I also just want to make it more contrasty. So let's just add one more color ramp. We'll put the color ramp after the Voronoi, and then I can drag the black tab out and drag the white tab out to make it more contrasty. So I can box select these nodes, I can join them into a frame, and I'll add a label, and I can just call this like texture 3. So as you can see now, we have 3 different groups of textures, and we're going to mix them together to make a cool granite material. So to mix them together, we can add mix color nodes. So I'm going to select this mix, and then shift select this mix, and I'll press Ctrl 0. That is going to add this mix color node, and as you can see, it's mixing them together. Now on the mix type here, I'm going to change this to darken instead, so it adds the dark values, and I'll turn the factor to 1. So here's this one here, here's that one there, and now you can see if I'm mixing them both together, you can see some of both, and it's mixing them together. Let's go to the add menu, and I want to add another mix color node, and this one we're going to leave set to mix. Now the result is going to go into color A, and then this top texture up here, the texture 3, is going to go into the factor. And let's Control Shift and select the mix to preview it. And then here on color B, this is going to be kind of like a light brown. And the hex value for color B is going to be a hex value of 999269. So let's take the result and I'll put that into the base color, and I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. And let's turn the roughness down for now so it looks more shiny and looks more like granite. Now I do want to have some variation in the roughness, so other parts are more rough and other parts are more shiny. So what I'm going to do is take this mix result and put that into the roughness instead. But you can see it's very shiny right now, and I want to control the brightness and darkness so it controls the roughness. So I'll go to the add menu and we can search for a color ramp, and I'll put the color ramp between the mix and the principled. So now I can just take this black tab and I can turn it up, and if it is lighter, it's going to be more rough. And if you want to use the same gray color I'm using, the hex value is going to be 373737. And then later on, when we create the custom node group, I want to be able to control the roughness values. So we're going to search for a hue saturation value node, and we'll put this after the color ramp. So the value will make this texture lighter or darker, so we can use this later to control the roughness. We can also box select these nodes and join them together into a frame with Ctrl J. And if you select the frame and press F2 to add a label, you can call this roughness because these are the roughness nodes. So now let's join it together into a custom node group. So I'm going to box select all the nodes except the material output. I'll press Ctrl G to join it together into a node group. Now if I press the N key to open the side panel, there's the interface settings here on the group tab, and I'm going to double click on the BSDF, and I'll rename that to shader because I like that better. So if I hit the tab key to go outside of the node group, you can see it's called shader. Let's also drag the node group bigger, and I can drag the node group over here next to the material output, and then I can just rename it to the brown granite. So we'll call it brown granite. And we'll hit the tab key to go back into the node group. Now if you go over here to this side, we have the group input, and so we can plug up the custom values up to the group input. Now this scale value is plugged up to all the textures, so this scale is controlling the size of the entire material. So we'll put the scale into the extra socket to control the size of the textures. But if I click on the scale here, you can see it is 3 values, but I just want it to be 1 value. So on the type here, we're going to click on vector, and we're going to change this to float instead. That way, there's going to be 1 single value. But I need to turn the default value back to 1. And then if I hit tab to go out of the node group, let's turn the scale back to 1. And I can now go into the node group. Now I also want to control all the colors, so let's drag the group input over here by the mix nodes. And I first want to drag this color into the extra socket, then this one here, and then also this one right here, put that into the extra socket, and this one here, and then finally this last one here, this mix color B, we can put that into the extra socket. And then we can rename all these colors 1 through 5. Then I want to control the detail values, so I'll drag the group input back here, and all of these nodes here have a detail value. So I'm going to plug the detail into the extra socket, and then I'll plug this detail into the same socket, and this detail from this noise will go into the same socket. That way, if I go outside of the node group, this detail value will control the detail for all the textures. So let's go back into the node group. Now, if you wanted to, you could add like the roughness values. You could also add this W value here to make it random. You could also change the scale, so you could add the scale values there. I'm not really interested in adding any of these to the custom node group because they don't do a whole lot, but you could of course change the scale. That might be something useful that you might want to add to the custom node group. But the last thing that I'm going to be adding is the roughness. So we'll drag the group input over here. here, and we have this hue saturation value, and the value is going to make it lighter or darker. So let's plug the value into the extra socket here. I can double click on this to rename it, and I'll rename it to roughness. All right, so let's drag the group input back over here. I'll hit the N key to close the side panel, and I'll hit tab to go outside of the node group. And there is the finished procedural material. And I also think this material looks really good on this cube here because it kind of looks like a slab of granite, which would be maybe on like a kitchen countertop or something like that. So let's just review the material. So we have the overall scale to change the size of the material, and then we have all the different colors. So if you wanted to, you could maybe make it like a light granite. So you could have this lighter color, maybe this brown color, you could make more like a gray color or even like a red color. So you can really do so much with these colors and really make a different looking material. You could even have like some darker little dots there or some specks, something like that. Then we also have the detail value, so if you want it less detailed you can, and then also the roughness value to make it more rough or more shiny. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you'd like to purchase this finished procedural material, you can get that on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. And also on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, you can get access to 3D models and assets, tutorial files, artwork project files, procedural materials, geometry node setups, and lots more Blender content on my Gumroad store and Patreon page. So if you'd like to help support the channel monthly, then joining one of my Patreon memberships is a great way to do that. Or if you'd like to just make a one-time purchase of one of my products, then my Gumroad store is a great way to do that. And if you'd like to purchase all of my procedural materials, then definitely check out my Ultimate Blender Procedural Material Pack, which comes with all of my procedural materials, plus it will come with future updates when I make more materials. And to learn how to create any of my procedural materials, definitely check out my Blender Procedural Material Tutorial playlist. The links are in the description. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.